Good Will Hunting gets remembered as a story about a damaged genius who wastes his potential until therapy finally lets him claim the future he's owed. But that reading treats Will as though he were the only real problem in the film. Watch it again, and another question begins to emerge. What happens when a private ability becomes visible enough for other people to want something from it? Before the film can answer that, it shows us Will's ability without showing us Will. Lambeau puts a difficult problem on the board for his graduate students, and by the next morning, someone the department has never heard of has solved it. The solution exists in the world. The solver doesn't, not publicly. For a brief moment, no one can decide what that talent should become, because no one knows who it belongs to. You could call that freedom. You could also call it hiding. The film leaves both possibilities open because once Will is identified, they become almost impossible to separate. This is the last point in the story when his ability can exist without other people immediately attaching a future to the person who has it. What happens when a private ability becomes visible enough for other people to want something from it? That anonymity doesn't last long. Lambeau puts an even harder problem on the board, and this time he finds Will solving it. Will takes off the moment he realizes someone has seen him. But what happens afterward matters more than the chase. Will is arrested for an unrelated assault, and it's the courtroom, not the hallway, that finally connects his ability to a real person with a real life. After Will is taken into custody for assaulting a police officer, Lambeau convinces the judge to release him under his supervision. The arrangement comes with two conditions. Will has to meet with Lambeau twice a week and attend therapy. Lambeau's help is genuine, but it also brings the first expectation of what Will should do with his gift. The film allows both things to be true. Lambeau steps in because he sincerely believes in Will. But that sincerity is what makes the arrangement feel so reasonable, and why the expectations inside it are so easy to miss. What begins as an arrangement between Will and Lambeau soon turns into a pattern that follows Will everywhere. Therapist after therapist gets mocked, pushed away, or completely thrown off balance before any of them can reach him. Maybe Will is trying to stay in control. Maybe he's afraid of what they might uncover. Or maybe he simply resents being forced through a process he never chose. The film never gives us one clean answer, and we shouldn't pretend that it does. At the same time, job interviews are being arranged as though Will has already agreed to a future other people are planning for him. Lambeau grows increasingly frustrated as Will keeps working construction and staying in South Boston instead of pursuing the kind of career Lambeau believes his intelligence demands. And this is where the film does something subtle. A preference gets read as avoidance. A boundary gets read as pathology. Staying where he is becomes proof that he's wasting himself. And every time he says no, it's treated as another sign that something inside him still needs to be fixed before he can be trusted to choose his own life. Maybe that comes from trauma. Maybe some of it is a genuine need for control. Most likely, it's both. But everyone around him keeps reaching the same conclusion. Will is wasting what he was given. That doesn't mean all of his resistance is healthy. Much of it clearly isn't. His defenses hurt the people around him and keep him trapped. But the film repeatedly treats his refusal as evidence of damage, before allowing for the possibility that he may simply not want the future being offered to him. That happens with the therapists, the job interviews, and Lambeau's math sessions. It isn't happening around the plot. It is the plot. The clearest evidence that Will's refusal is not always a symptom comes during the government interview. He's brought in because of what his mind could do for national defense, and the people across the table seem to assume the meeting is simply the last step before he accepts. But Will doesn't turn the job down because he's intimidated by it. He explains why he wants no part of it. Once his work leaves his hands, it moves through a chain of command he can't control. Someone else decides how it will be used. Someone else gives the order, and people Will will never meet could pay the price. He isn't running from an opportunity. He's thinking through its consequences more carefully than the people offering it to him. For once, the film allows his refusal to be judgment rather than damage. That doesn't make every other refusal healthy, but it means we can't treat every no as proof that something is wrong with him. Visible talent gets treated like an asset that owes the world a return. Gifted children often learn early that being able to do more becomes an expectation that they should do more. Their ability stops feeling like something they simply have and starts feeling like a debt they're expected to repay. Choose an ordinary life, and people call it waste. Keep achieving, and they take it as proof that you're finally living correctly. Somewhere along the way, other people begin to feel entitled to an opinion about what that talent should become. Goodwill Hunting makes that pattern personal. The next two people pushing Will toward a different life aren't trying to use him. They genuinely love him. Skylar isn't recruiting him. She asks Will to come to California because she wants a life with him, not because she's decided what he should do with his intelligence. She isn't asking him to prove that he deserves her. As far as the film shows us, she has already chosen him. That makes her invitation very different from Lambeau's expectations or the government's offer. But it's still an invitation into a future Will hasn't chosen. Going with her would mean leaving Boston, trusting someone completely, and believing the relationship will survive once he depends on it. That's why his refusal can't be reduced to a simple fear of commitment. It comes from something much older than Skylar. Will has learned to expect that closeness ends in abandonment, so pushing someone away first feels safer than giving her the chance to leave. When Skylar asks him to be honest, he tells her about the abuse and abandonment in his past. The disclosure explains where his fear comes from, but it also creates more distance. He tells her the truth in a way that makes staying close to him almost impossible. Will is revealing something real, and he's also using that truth to protect himself. The film doesn't ask us to call it only vulnerability or only defense. It shows how easily one can become the other when someone expects love to disappear. Then there's Chuckie, whose pressure comes from an even more selfless place. He doesn't want Will's intelligence for himself. He isn't asking Will to make him money, get him a job, or take him along. He can't stand the thought of Will having options that none of them were given and refusing to use them. When Chuckie says the best part of his day is the few seconds before Will answers the door, he's admitting that he hopes one morning Will be gone. He doesn't point Will toward a school, a woman, or a profession. He only wants him to leave the life they're both living because he believes Will has the chance for something more. Somebody who wants nothing from you personally can still want you gone. Chuckie's pressure may be the most loving pressure anyone places on Will, but it's still pressure, and what he wants happens to match what everyone else has been pushing Will toward. Away from construction, away from South Boston, toward a future that seems more worthy of his ability. That doesn't make Chuckie the same as Lambeau or the government. Care and exploitation aren't morally equal just because they point in the same direction, but they can still produce the same push. By the time Chuckie finishes speaking, most of us want Will to leave too. Nobody's accused you of anything yet. You've just quietly noticed which way you're rooting and how easily you got there. Sean is different because he never tells Will to leave and never gives him a destination. He isn't impressed enough by Will's intelligence to let it control the room, but he isn't threatened by it either. Almost everyone else responds to the mind first and the man somewhere further down the list. Sean refuses to do that. He sits with Will through the jokes, the insults, the silence, and every attempt to control the session. He doesn't win by outsmarting him. He waits until Will no longer needs to perform. The breakthrough comes when Sean stops analyzing him and repeats one simple reassurance: "It's not your fault." He says it again and again, until Will can no longer keep the words at a safe distance. Will finally allows himself to feel what happened to him as a child. Not because Sean drags a confession out of him, but because Sean makes it safe for him to stop defending himself. Sean's story about missing the World Series makes the difference clear. He had the chance to witness a historic game, but chose instead to spend the night with the woman he would marry. He isn't telling Will that love is always more important than ambition, or that Will should make the same choice. He's showing him that a meaningful life can't be measured only by what looks impressive from the outside. A choice can be right because of what it means to the person living it, not because it satisfies the people keeping score. Sean never tells Will where to go. He helps him reach a place where the decision can finally belong to him. That's different from everything else offered in the film because it doesn't come with a correct answer attached. The ending gives Will the chance to make that decision. He leaves without announcing his plan, but the note he leaves Sean makes his emotional direction clear. By repeating Sean's line about having to see about a girl, Will turns the World Series story back toward him. The next morning, Chuckie arrives at the apartment as he always does. He knocks, waits, and realizes that Will is gone. The moment he imagined has finally happened, and the first thing we see on his face is relief. The film doesn't show us where Will ends up. It shows him driving towards Skylar and the future she left open. Seen against everything that came before it, the ending answers more than one question. Will moves towards Skylar, and his empty apartment gives Chuckie the moment he had always hoped for. But the film never gives Lambeau the ending he imagined. We don't see Will begin a prestigious career or make any particular use of his mathematical ability. All we see is movement. Will is no longer standing still inside a life everyone else believed he should live. After spending the entire film being taught to see that stillness as waste, seeing him move is enough to make us feel that he's finally becoming who he was supposed to be. Will made the choice. No one made it for him, and that matters. The ending feels liberating because, on its own terms, it is. Sean has helped him reach a place where fear no longer makes every decision. But it's worth asking what makes us feel so relieved as we watch him drive away. We're happy that he's free, but also that he uses that freedom to move in the direction we had already decided was right for him. Somewhere between the anonymous problem on Lambeau's board and the highway toward California, Will's ability became something other people felt entitled to have an opinion about. Eventually, the audience did too. The choice belongs to Will. The relief belongs to us. And that relief reveals how long ago we had already decided what his freedom was supposed to look like. If this changed the way you see Good Will Hunting, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy looking past the version of a film everyone remembers to find what it may really be saying, subscribe to The Prism. There's always another way to look at it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, please take care of yourself.